Hello and welcome to Facilities Grid webinar, How to Encourage Pre-Verification Testing. Thank you for joining us. In today's webinar, I will review the benefits of the pre-verification testing and how to mandate the testing as part of the commissioning process. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Alex Kozinets and I'm a Chief Product Officer at Facility Grid. I'm leading up product strategy and customer success and conducting the educational programming and webinars. My background is in mechanical engineering, construction administration, and commissioning. I have used Facility Grid on various commissioning projects throughout my career. So as a former commissioning professional, I'm here to help Facility Grid be even more focused on its customers. Now let's get to the webinar you came for. In today's webinar, we will review what is pre-verification testing, PVT, benefits of the testing, how to mandate pre-verification testing, typical process for conducting PVTs, and managing PVTs in Facility Grid. So how often do you get to the job site to conduct functional performance testing and realize that this is the first time contractors are seeing the FPT procedures? Also, completion of the pre-functional checklists typically used as an indicating factor of the equipment readiness for the functional tests. However, just because all the boxes are checked does not necessarily mean that the equipment is ready to perform according to the sequence of operations per the approved control submittals, which are typically used as a basis for the FPT procedures. One way to avoid this is by performing pre-verification testing. What is pre-verification testing? Facility Grid refers to pre-verification testing as PVTs. Sometimes people use other definitions for this type of pre-testing. Basically, PVTs are a dry run of the FPTs. Facility Grid creates PVTs automatically as identical copies of the FPTs. Contractors have the required permissions to document their responses to the PVT questions, unlike questions in the FPTs. Let's look at what are the main benefits of the pre-verification tests. First, PVT help contractors get ready for the FPTs and address any potential issues that otherwise may arise during the testing. Also, PVTs help commissioning agents gauge level of readiness for the functional performance tests. Since responses in the pre-verification tests are integrated into the associated functional performance tests, they can indicate what was pre-tested and if there were any discrepancies or issues during the pre-testing. It is a well-known industry fact that sometimes the actual building automation systems programming does not match the approved control submittals. Why is it? Well, because most of the time, the person preparing the submittal is not the one writing the actual program code a year later. However, please keep in mind, it is not always the contractor's fault. Engineers sometimes copy control sequences from one project to another without tailoring them to the project requirements. So what happens sometimes, instead of issuing an RFI, the person writing the code ignores an incorrect sequence operation and writes a program based on how he or she has done it in the past on a previous project. This could result in failed FPTs, as commissioning agents are still responsible to verify that the equipment operates per the design documents and the approved control submittal, unless the engineer of record actually approved the required modifications in the sequence of operations. So during completion of FPTs, if contractors determine that there are any deviations in programming from the design documents or approved submittals or testing procedures, they can notify the team and resolve those deviations ahead of the FPTs. If this happens, this would save time for everyone and would minimize any potential delays during the FPT process. How would you mandate inclusion of pre-verification testing into the project requirements? Well, first, PVT process shall be documented in the project scope of commissioning activities, along with the extent of equipment to be pre-tested. This can be done in a general commissioning requirement specification 019113. Also, the requirements for the pre-verification testing shall be included in the commissioning plan. Then, the pre-verification testing shall be reviewed during the commissioning kickoff meeting and also during the controls integration meeting. What are the typical procedures for conducting the PVTs? So PVTs shall be conducted following completion of all startup and pre-functional activities for the associated equipment. As a minimum, it is recommended to complete PVTs for one equipment instance per each major equipment type. For example, if on your project you have several air handling units, VV boxes, pumps, chillers, and so on and so forth, what you would want to do is conduct one PVT for each major equipment type, like an air handling unit, or maybe a chiller, a pump. Contractors should be encouraged to submit any questions or suggestions if they're not able to perform certain tests as described in a script, or if they believe there is a better way for conducting them. So this can be done by generating issues directly from the pre-verification tests and assigning them to the commissioning agent or to the engineer of record. This could also be done by submitting an RFI through the typical RFI submission process. Also, snapshots of trends can be attached to the pre-verification tests for review with the engineer of record and the commissioning agent if the contractors are unable to achieve the expected results. Basically, the goal is to address any concerns ahead of the functional performance tests conducted by the commissioning agent. Now let's take a look at how this process can be managed in Facility Grid. I am now logged into Facility Grid as a controls contractor. So let's assume I would like to conduct a pre-verification test for an air handling unit. So I'm going to click on the project icon and get to the project. Then I'm going to find the PVT that I'm interested in. PVTs in Facility Grid are located under the Test tab. So to get to the PVT, you simply click on the PVT tab, and you get to the list of all the PVTs. We can now use a filtering option to filter out the PVT that we're interested in responding, and simply click on this testing procedure. So again, this testing procedure of the PVT is an identical copy of the FPT. The only difference is, as I mentioned before, is FPTs in Facility Grid are for the commissioning agents to respond to. Basically, anyone on the project can view an FPT, but they do not have sufficient permissions to respond to the FPT questions. PVTs are intended to be responded to by the contractors. So typically, a controls contractor would be responding to the questions in the PVT. So this is my PVT, and I'm going through the questionnaire and populating my answers. So basically, just indicating whether the certain procedure took place and what were the results. So basically, just by responding yes, no, and nay, I document my responses. I may come to a certain section of the PVT where some information is incorrect, or I may provide a certain response. So for example, as I'm scrolling through the PVT, I get to a section where, for example, it states that the initial duct static pressure set point was set to 0.75. So as a controls contractor, I know that when the testing and balancing has been performed, the actual pressure has been set, or set point has been set to 1.5 inches. So I can simply provide this information in the responses box, and so this information would be available to the commissioning agent when he or she performs the actual task. Now, I may also come to a section, in this case, unoccupied operation, where I know as a controls contractor that this particular sequence of operation is not applicable to this equipment, because this equipment happens to operate 24/7. It does not have simply an occupied mode. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to indicate my responses as non-applicable, and then I'm going to simply click on this issues icon, which is the triangle, and create an issue. You can see that Facility Grid automatically copies the text from that particular question into the description of the issue. So I've already done it, and basically I'm going to show you how the issue managing process would be handled in Facility Grid. So again, as a controls contractor, I went through the procedure. I realized that a certain procedure is not applicable to this specific test. So I documented this in the description section of the issue by stating that this issue no longer has an occupied mode of operation, as the space is occupied 24/7. Now I'm asking the engineer of record to revise the sequence of operation, and also I'm asking the commissioning agent to update the test procedure. So I created an issue. I have assigned a high priority because this keeping me from being able to complete the actual testing. I'm going to assign a status to this issue, and you can see the status currently is assigned as reviewed, is because the engineer of record has already responded to this question. But when I originally assigned it, I assigned the status as open. As you probably know, whenever you create an issue in Facility Grid from an FPT or PVT or a checklist, the issue gets automatically assigned to an asset associated with that testing procedure. So I know in this case, my issue will be assigned to this particular air handling unit. I'm going to specify the resolution due date, and I'm going to put the date for tomorrow, because again, I need this issue to be addressed as soon as possible. And I assign this issue to the mechanical engineer. As soon as I have finished entering this data, populating this information, I'm going to click on the button Save. Or Save and Exit. Once I click on that button, the issue notification will go directly to the person or the company that have been assigned to this particular issue. Also, anyone included in this notification section will be notified of this issue. So I may decide to include a commissioning agent as the person to be notified on this issue. So the commissioning agent understands that, okay, there's an issue on this test that has to be addressed prior to conducting the actual functional performance tests. And again, the reason is because we want to conduct the functional performance testing only once the testing procedure is aligned with the sequence of operation, and when both are aligned with what has been programmed. Now, the engineer of record receives a notification of this particular issue and then enters their response. So in this case, the engineer of record logged in into the software and indicated that they agree with the comments and the sequence of operation has been revised. Now it is the job of the commissioning agent to assign this issue to himself or herself and then revise the functional testing procedure and then provide the response in the response section to indicate that the issue has been addressed, the sequence operation has been revised, and the functional performance testing has been updated per the revised sequence of operation. And now when the contractor, since the contractor has originated the issue, the contractor can review the new sequence, can review the response of the commissioning agent, make sure that his or her programming matches those two documents, and then close this issue. Once the issue is closed, the commissioning agent will be ready to get to the job site and perform the functional testing. Now let's look how commissioning agent, when he or she gets to the job site, can view that procedure. So now I'm logging in into Facility Grid as a commissioning agent. Again, I'm entering the project and going to the tests. Now, I'm interested in performing the FPT. So I'm clicking on the FPT tab and again, filtering out the FPT that I'm interested in conducting. In this case, it is FPT number 306 for the variable air volume air handling unit. Again, if you remember, the PVT had exactly the same name. So PVT is an identical copy of the FPT. So now I'm entering this functional performance test and I'm scrolling down. And as I'm scrolling down, I get to see the responses to the questions provided by the controls contractors. So I can see where the controls contractor stated that the responses are yes. Also, I can see where the controls contractor added responses NA. So if by the time I'm looking at this FPT, I have addressed the issue that was brought up by the controls contractor, and I've already modified the functional testing procedure. This question, and I deleted these questions because in this case, they no longer make sense because there's no unoccupied mode of operation. So these questions would not even be part of my FPT. Also, as I scroll down, I'm going to get to the information related to the static pressure set point. So when the contractor indicated that the set point is actually 1.5, not 7.5. Again, when I'm performing the test as a commissioning agent, I have all this information in front of me. I don't have to search. I don't have to guess what the actual value is supposed to be. Again, I can verify it by looking at the testing balancing report, but I know at least the controls contractor indicated what has been programmed in the BES and what data is actually in the program. Again, I'm scrolling down through the FPT. Again, all the rest of the responses are yes, so I'm very happy. I know the contractor already went through this. I know the contractor is aware of how this particular test is going to be conducted. So it's going to be very easy for me and for the contractor to go through this testing again. Now, as I scrolled all the way down, I'm going to get to the issues section. And this is the issue that contractor has created. Okay, again, at this point, I can simply provide the response and just state that the issue has been addressed and FPT procedure has been revised. Okay. In this case, I can also change the status of the issue. I can close it. Obviously, as a commissioning authority on the project, I have the permissions to close any issues. So I can actually close it, or I can keep it in review mode for the controls contractor to actually agree with my statements, with my responses, and close it. So when the controls contractor gets notification from the commissioning agent, then he or she can go in and close this particular issue. And basically, again, what we've achieved was few things. Number one is the controls contractor is aware of type of the test, of the testing procedure that's going to be performed during the functional testing with the commissioning agent. Number two is the functional performance testing procedure is now aligned with the sequence operation that has been submitted as part of the control submittal, and also it matches what has been programmed for this particular piece of equipment. So the goal is basically to avoid any potential issues that would be caused by any of these issues coming up during the actual functional performance testing procedures. Okay, this is the end of the presentation, and now I will be answering the questions if you have any. Question number one is, who generates PVTs in facility grid? PVT testing procedures are identical copies of functional performance tests. When commissioning agent generates FPTs, and as you know, first commissioning agents generate FPTs on the type level, and then facility grid generates copies of the similar FPTs for each instance for that type. So for example, if there are several air handling units on the project and commissioning agents generated a single FPT on the type level for this air handling unit, and then facility grid will generate instance of FPT for each instance of the associated equipment. And at the same time, facility grid will also generate an instance of a PVT for each individual piece of equipment. So there is no any additional work involved on part of commissioning agent or anyone else. Basically, PVTs are created automatically on the projects. Okay, I do not see any additional questions. So thank you very much for attending today's webinar, and I look forward to seeing you on any future webinars.